If you've ever worked alone after midnight, you know how fast a normal shift can start to feel wrong. In this video, one clerk starts noticing the same customer returning for reasons that make no sense. A hotel employee hears movement on a floor that should be completely empty, and a warehouse worker finds out some noises in a restricted area are a lot closer than they first seemed. These are 3 true night shift stories where the worst part wasn't being alone, it was realizing they weren't. The guy first came in a little after 1 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, and if he had only shown up once, I probably never would have thought about him again. I was 22 at the time and working overnights at a convenience store just outside Columbus, the kind of place that sat off the highway near a gas station and a closed-down car wash. We got a weird mix of customers after midnight. Truckers, drunks, exhausted nurses, teenagers trying to buy nicotine with terrible fake IDs. It wasn't exactly dangerous most nights, but there was a kind of loneliness to it that got under your skin after a while. From 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., it was usually just me in the store. The windows were all glass across the front, which sounds safer than it actually feels at 3 o'clock in the morning. The whole place was lit up so bright inside that after dark, it worked like a mirror. You could see the aisles and the register and the coffee station perfectly. Outside, all you really saw was whatever happened to be standing under the parking lot lights. That night had been dead. I remember restocking the drink cooler and checking my phone every few minutes because I was fighting to stay awake. I heard the bell over the door and looked up expecting some regular coming in for cigarettes. Instead, it was this guy in a dark gray hoodie and jeans. Mid-30s maybe, average height, clean-shaven. Nothing dramatic or memorable about him at first glance, which is probably why he bothered me so much later. There was nothing visibly wrong with him. He just had this flat, watchful expression, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. He walked slowly down the first aisle, then the second, then stopped by the refrigerator doors without opening any of them. I gave him a usual, "How's it going?" and he didn't answer. Not in a rude way exactly. He just acted like he hadn't heard me. After a minute, he brought a bottle of water and a pack of gum to the counter. He put them down carefully, not casually like most people do. Then he looked at my name tag and said, "Evan, that's a solid name." It caught me off guard a little. I kind of laughed and said, "Thanks." He nodded once, paid in cash, took his change, and before he left, he said, "Quiet night for you." I said, "Usually is." Then he gave me this look I still think about sometimes. Not threatening, not friendly either, more like he was filing that information away. He left, got into a dark blue sedan, parked off to the side of the building, and sat there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes before pulling out. I remember watching his headlights disappear and thinking he was weird, but that was it. The next night, he came back at almost the exact same time. This time he bought a sports drink and one of those little packs of aspirin. Same hoodie, same blank expression, same slow walk through the aisles like he was checking something. When he got to the register, he looked past me toward the back office and said, "You alone again?" I told him my co-worker was in the restroom, which was a lie. I said it automatically. Something about the way he asked made my stomach tighten. He looked at me for an extra second, then nodded like that made sense. Long shift. Yep. He paid in cash again, exact change this time, and left. After that, he started showing up every few nights. Always between 12:30 and 2 a.m. Always buying something small. Water, gum, energy drink, granola bar. Once just a lighter. He never caused a scene. Never said anything openly threatening. If I tried to explain to someone why he bothered me, I wouldn't have had much to point to except the feeling I got when he walked in. And the questions. "Busy tonight? Manager ever stay this late? You close alone? You from around here, Evan?" That last one got my attention. My name was on my tag, sure, but I'd never told him where I was from. I just shrugged and said, "Sort of." He smiled a little. "You've got one of those local school bumper stickers on your car." I felt my face go hot. My car was parked in the side lot near the dumpster where employees were supposed to park. You couldn't see it from the register. You'd have to either walk to the side of the building or deliberately look over there from outside. I said, He took his receipt, folded it in half, and said, just noticed it. After he left, I locked the front door for about 10 minutes and pretended I was mopping so I could calm down. We technically weren't supposed to lock up unless it was an emergency, but my nerves were shot. The next day I told my manager about him. He barely looked up from counting cigarettes. He asked if the guy had stolen anything or threatened me. I said no. He said there wasn't much he could do then, and reminded me the cameras covered the sales floor and the lot. That made me feel a little better for maybe one shift. Then on Friday night, right around 1:40, I saw the blue sedan pull into the lot and stop where it always stopped, off to the side, not directly in front of the entrance. He stayed in the car for almost a full minute before coming inside. That time he didn't pick anything up. He just wandered to the coffee station, stood there, then came to the register empty-handed. I asked if he needed help finding something. He said, "No, I just wanted to see if you were here tonight." I tried to keep my voice normal. "Store's open." He looked around the empty place and said, "Yeah, it is." Then he leaned slightly closer, not enough to be aggressive, just enough that I could smell cold air and cigarette smoke on his hoodie. "You should tell your boss that side camera doesn't work." For a second, I didn't understand what he meant. Then I did. The side camera covered the employee parking area. I stepped back and said, "I'm pretty sure all the cameras work." He held my stare for a moment, then smiled for the first time. It was a tiny smile, but it made him look worse, not better. "You should check." And then he walked out. I immediately pulled up the camera feed monitor we kept under the counter. The front camera was fine. Register camera, fine. Le cameras, fine. But when I clicked to the side lot feed, the screen was black. I remember just staring at it. My hands actually started shaking. I called my manager. No answer. Called again. Nothing. Then I called the store owner, who sounded irritated until I told him some guy had mentioned a dead camera while repeatedly showing up during my overnight shifts. He got quiet after that and told me to lock the doors and wait for police. When the officer came, he was polite, but I could already tell from his face that this was landing in the category of maybe creepy, maybe nothing. He took the guy's description, asked if he'd touched me or made a threat, and then checked outside. The sedan was gone. The officer told me to call again if he returned and suggested I have someone walk me to my car in the morning. I almost laughed at that. There was no one to walk me anywhere. The owner came in before sunrise and checked the camera wiring himself. The cable to the side unit had been cut clean. Not torn, not weather damaged. Cut. He finally took it seriously then. Said he'd switch me to today's shift for a little while. I agreed, and for about a week, I thought that was the end of it. Then one afternoon, I came out of my apartment building and found a pack of gum tucked under my windshield wiper. Same brand he always bought. There was no note, nothing written on it, just the gum. I stood there in the parking lot looking around like an idiot, expecting to see somebody watching me from another car. I even drove around the block before heading to work because I was convinced I was being followed. I called the police again, but there wasn't much they could do with a pack of gum and a story about a strange customer. After that, I stayed with my older brother for a while and quit 2 weeks later. What still bothers me is that nothing ever fully happened. No attack, no break-in, no big moment where I could point to one clear thing and say, that's when it became serious. It was all small enough to second-guess and personal enough to feel deliberate. Even now, years later, if I'm in a gas station late at night and I see someone walk in without heading for anything on the shelves, I feel my chest tighten before I can stop it. Because the truth is, I never found out what that guy wanted. And part of me thinks he enjoyed making sure I knew that. The 5th floor was supposed to be empty, which is why the first complaint didn't make any sense. I was working the front desk at a Marriott-branded hotel outside Nashville, one of those business travel places near an interstate where people mostly checked in late, slept for 6 hours, and left before sunrise. I was 27 then, doing audit shifts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 4 nights a week. Anyone who's worked hotel overnights knows how strange those hours are. It's not busy in a normal sense, but you're never fully relaxed either. The lobby goes quiet, the elevator dings at random, doors open somewhere above you, and every small thing sounds bigger after 2 o'clock in the morning. Most of the time, I was alone. Housekeeping was gone, maintenance was gone, and the manager lived 30 minutes away. If something happened, I was the one who had to deal with it first. The 5th floor had been closed for renovations for almost a month. No guests, no housekeeping, no access cards issued for that level unless maintenance needed them. Half the hallway lights were shut off to save power, and there was plastic sheeting over several doorways. I knew that floor better than anyone because every shift, part of my checklist was making sure the elevator wouldn't stop there unless a staff key was used. That's why, when room 314 called down around 12:40 a.m. to complain about running upstairs, I almost told them they had the wrong hotel. The guest was annoyed, but not angry yet. He said it sounded like someone sprinting back and forth directly over his room for the last 10 minutes. I apologized, told him the floor above him wasn't occupied, and said I'd check anyway. You made me repeat that part. What do you mean it isn't occupied? It's closed right now, sir. There was a pause. Then he said, well, somebody's up there. I grabbed the master key and took the service elevator up. The second those doors opened, I felt embarrassed for even taking the complaint seriously. The whole floor looked dead. Dark carpet, dim emergency lighting, the smell of drywall dust and paint. Plastic taped over a set of rooms down the east hallway. No voices, no movement, nothing. I walked the entire floor, shining my flashlight into the alcoves and around the ice machine area. Nobody. I even stood still in the center of the hallway for a few seconds, listening. Silence. I went back down, called room 314, and told the guest I didn't find anything. He sounded unconvinced, but the noise had stopped. At 1:20, another call came in. Different room, 317 this time. This guest sounded more nervous than irritated. She said she heard what sounded like furniture dragging on the ceiling, then a hard knock directly above her bed. I told her the same thing I told the other guest, and she said, I know how this sounds, but I'm not imagining it. That line stuck with me because it was exactly what someone says when they think they're not going to be believed. So I went back up. Again, nothing. I checked the locked stairwell door on 5. Still secured. Walked both hallways. Checked the maintenance room. Empty. A little colder up there than the rest of the hotel, but that was normal because the climate system had been shut off on that level during the renovation. I came back down more annoyed than worried. I even started thinking maybe there was some pipe issue or construction material shifting in the walls. Then, around 2:05, I heard it myself. I was behind the desk folding registration printouts when there was a heavy thud from somewhere above the lobby ceiling. Not a creak, not settling. A distinct impact like something dropped hard on a carpet. Then, maybe 2 seconds later, another one. I looked up automatically, even though there was obviously nothing to see. The hotel was dead quiet otherwise. No TV on in the breakfast area. No check-ins. No traffic noise through the glass doors. Just me at the desk and 2 heavy sounds directly overhead. I checked the reservation system one more time, even though I already knew the answer. 5th floor, out of order. No assigned rooms. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a guest complaint and started feeling personal, because now I knew I hadn't just been brushing off bored or difficult people. There really was something up there. I called my manager, straight to voicemail. Then I did what I'm still not sure was brave or stupid and took the elevator back up. This time, as soon as the doors opened, I heard a door click shut somewhere down the west hall. It wasn't loud, just a quick, unmistakable latch sound. I froze with one hand still on the flashlight. The hall ahead of me was empty, but that didn't matter. I had worked there long enough to know what sound a guest room door made when it closed properly. I said, "Hello?" "Front desk." No answer. I started walking. The carpet muted my steps, which somehow made it worse. My light passed over room numbers, strips of peeled wallpaper, carts of box tile stacked against the wall. Everything looked still, but not untouched. One sheet of plastic near room 522 was moving slightly, not enough to flap, just enough to tell me there was airflow from somewhere. I checked the nearest doors, all closed. Then I noticed one of them wasn't latched all the way. Room 524. The door was resting just barely open, maybe an inch. I knew for a fact I hadn't seen it that way on either of my first two walkthroughs. I said hello, again louder. Nothing. I pushed it open with the end of the flashlight. The room was dark except for the orange glow of the parking lot lights bleeding through the curtains. The furniture had been covered in plastic. The TV was missing from the wall. There was a toolbox on the floor near the bathroom, which I assumed one of the contractors had left behind earlier that day. Then my flashlight landed on the bed. The plastic cover over the mattress had a long depression in the center of it, as if someone had been sitting there. Not old either, fresh enough that the plastic was still slowly flattening back out. I backed out immediately. I didn't yell. I didn't go looking further. I just stepped into the hall, pulled the door shut, and radioed the overnight security line that covered several of the company's properties. It was basically a third-party patrol service, and the dispatcher told me someone could be there in 20 to 25 minutes. I remember saying, "I think someone is on our closed floor," and hearing how absurd it sounded even as I said it. The dispatcher told me to return to the lobby and wait. I turned to head back toward the elevator and stopped. At the far end of the hallway, maybe 50 feet away near the ice machine alcove, someone was standing half behind the corner. I can't give you a perfect description because the light was bad and I only saw them for maybe a second and a half. Tall, maybe male, dark clothes. One hand against the wall, not moving, just far enough out that I could tell they were watching me. Then they pulled back out of sight. I took off toward the elevator so fast I nearly dropped my flashlight. I hit the button 3 or 4 times, even though it was already lit. That horrible few seconds waiting for the doors to open felt much longer than it probably was. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that person walking toward me down the hall. But nothing came. The doors opened. I got in. I went straight to the lobby and locked myself in the back office until the patrol guy arrived. He checked the 5th floor with me and found nothing. No person, no open stairwell, no signs of forced entry. But room 524 was different now. The toolbox was gone. I know exactly where it had been because I remembered almost tripping over it in the dark as I backed out. The room was empty when we re-entered it. Empty and still. The patrol guy suggested maybe maintenance had been up there late and forgot to tell me. My manager said basically the same thing in the morning, though I could tell by his face he didn't fully believe it either. What changed everything was the key log. Every staff card used on closed floors was tracked digitally. The manager pulled it later that day and called me at home. No maintenance cards had accessed 5 that night. Only one card had, Mine. I quit about a month after that for unrelated reasons, but to this day, that's the one story people ask me about when hotel work comes up. They always want to know how someone got up there. I don't know. What bothers me more is the timing. If I hadn't gone back that 3rd time, I think whoever was up there would have stayed hidden and left whenever they wanted. Instead, they knew exactly when I was on that floor, exactly when I was alone, and exactly how long they had before anyone else came. And for at least one moment, standing under those dim hallway lights, they let me see them. The noise started on a night when I almost stayed home. I worked at a distribution warehouse outside Indianapolis, the kind of massive concrete building you pass from the highway without thinking about it. We handled medical supplies, mostly nothing flashy, just pallets of boxed inventory moving in and out around the clock. I was on second shift when I started there, But after a few months, I took the overnight position because it paid more. My hours were 10 p.m. to 6:30 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. People picture warehouse work as non-stop motion, forklifts, scanners, people yelling over backup alarms. That's true during the day. At night, it was different, quieter, wider somehow. We still had a skeleton crew, but once inbound trucks were done and the front office lights went out, huge parts of the building felt abandoned. Half the overheads were dimmed to save power. Entire aisles sat in shadow unless someone was actively picking there. And there were parts of the warehouse nobody on night shift was supposed to enter without a supervisor, especially the caged inventory area in the back northeast corner. That was where I heard the banging. It was around 3:15 in the morning, the dead stretch of the shift, when everybody starts slowing down. I had just finished scanning a return pallet and was pushing an empty jack back toward receiving when I heard 3 metallic hits in a row from somewhere behind the restricted cage. Not loud enough to sound like a machine failure, more like somebody striking shelving with a pipe or a cart handle. I stopped and listened. Nothing. The warehouse had plenty of random sounds at night. Fans kicking on, pallet wraps snapping, a dock plate dropping somewhere far off. But this had rhythm to it. 3 hits, pause, then silence. I asked over the radio if anybody was working back in Northeast. No answer at first. Then my lead, Marco, came back and said, "Negative." "What?" I told him I heard something near the cage. He said it was probably expansion noise from the racking or one of the dock doors settling. He sounded half asleep himself. I let it go. About 20 minutes later, I was in aisle 14 scanning overstock when I heard it again. 3 hits, pause, then a scraping sound, like something heavy dragged a short distance across concrete. This time it was clearer because the rest of the building had gone quiet. I remember standing there with my scanner in my hand, looking between the tall racks, trying to figure out if the sound was bouncing weirdly from another department. Warehouses do that. Noise travels and twists around metal. Something can happen 50 yards away and sound like it's right behind you. Still, I radioed again. "Anybody in Northeast now?" A couple people answered from packing and loading. Nobody was back there. Marco sounded more alert this time and told me to stay where I was while he checked the camera feed in the office. A minute later he said, "I don't see anything." That should have been reassuring, but the way he said it wasn't. It sounded like he was looking fast and wanted the issue to go away. He told me to get back to work. So I did. At 4 o'clock, we took our last break. There were 5 of us in the break room, all tired enough to barely talk. I mentioned the noise and got the kind of reaction weird workplace stuff usually gets. One guy said the building was haunted. Another said a raccoon had gotten in once through a dock leveler, and maybe it was that. Marco didn't say much, just drank his coffee and looked at the vending machine like he was thinking. When break ended, he pulled me aside and said, "Do me a favor. Go check that back door by the cage. Make sure it's still chained." I said, "Why me?" He shrugged. "Because you heard it." I should have pushed back, but I didn't. At most jobs, especially overnight, there's this pressure not to be the person who makes a small thing into a big one. So I grabbed a flashlight from the charging station and headed to the back. The restricted area was enclosed by chain link partitions about 10 feet high with a lock gate in the middle. It stored controlled inventory and damaged product waiting for documentation. The back emergency exit was beyond it, set into the far wall. You could see part of it through the cage if you stood at the right angle. As I got closer, the air felt colder. Not supernatural colder, just that empty building, concrete at night, kind of cold. The motion lights over the cage were on, which I noticed right away because nobody should have been back there to trigger them. I stopped walking. I told myself they were on a timer, or maybe someone from evening shift had left them that way. Then I heard the scraping again, much closer this time. It came from inside the restricted area. I called out, "Marco." No response. My flashlight beam shook a little as I aimed it through the fencing. Rows of palletized boxes, metal shelving, a shrink-wrapped stack of returns. Nothing moving. Then I saw the gate. It was open, not wide open, just enough to show a strip of darkness where the latch should have been secured. I knew I hadn't opened it, and unless Marco had checked it earlier and forgotten to tell me, it should have been locked. I radioed him immediately. No response. I tried again. Still nothing. At that point, I should have turned around and walked back to the office. Instead, I pushed the gate with 2 fingers and stepped inside. I can justify it now by saying I thought maybe someone from maintenance had gotten stuck back there, or that if the emergency door was unsecured, it was my responsibility to check it. But really, I think I just wanted a normal explanation before my imagination got any worse. Inside the cage, sound changed. The rest of the warehouse dropped away behind the fencing, and all I could hear was the faint hum of refrigeration from another section and the tiny crunch of my own shoes on grit. The back exit was about 30 feet ahead. The chain that was usually wrapped through the push bar was hanging loose on one side. The door wasn't standing open, but it wasn't fully shut either. There was a gap maybe an inch wide, showing blackness beyond the frame. I remember staring at that gap and feeling my stomach sink. Someone had either come in that way or gone out that way, and neither option made me feel better. Then, from somewhere to my right behind a row of stacked cartons, a man's voice said very quietly, "Hey, I don't think my body has ever reacted faster to anything." I spun so hard, I nearly dropped the flashlight. The beam landed on boxes, shrink wrap, steel uprights. No person, but I knew exactly where the voice had come from. 10 feet away at most. I backed up fast, bumping into a pallet and catching myself. "Who's there?" Nothing. Then the same voice, calm as could be, from a different spot farther down the row. "I need help." That was the worst part. Not yelling, not threatening, just low and conversational, like somebody trying not to attract attention. Every instinct I had was telling me not to go toward it. I backed toward the gate, keeping the flashlight aimed forward. My radio crackled suddenly, and Marco's voice came through, too loud in the silence. "You back there?" The second the radio made noise, something moved. A shape crossed the gap between 2 stacks at the end of the row. Fussed. Human. Dark jacket, maybe. I only got a piece of it, but it was enough. I bolted for the gate and almost collided with Marco, who was finally hurrying up from receiving with another guy behind him. I grabbed his arm and said there was someone inside. We went back with 2 more employees and called police from the office while we waited near the main aisle. Nobody wanted to be the first one into the cage again, which told me my panic had finally become real to everyone else too. When officers arrived, they searched the restricted area, then the exterior around the back of the building. They found the emergency door propped from the outside with a thin strip of folded rubber wedged near the latch, just enough to keep it from fully catching. Easy to miss unless you look closely. What they did not find was the person who had spoken to me. There were footprints outside in the gravel service lane, but the ground was too hard and half frozen to get anything useful. One of the officers asked if I was certain I'd heard a voice. I told him yes. Absolutely yes. He nodded in that neutral way cops do when they aren't calling you a liar but also aren't committing to your version of events. I figured that would be the end of it. Then one of the supervisors checked the camera coverage for that corner of the warehouse. There was a blind spot inside the restricted area created by the shelving layout. Anyone who knew where to stand could stay mostly hidden from the overhead cameras while still moving between rows. And according to the exterior footage, the back service lane had been empty until 2:51 a.m., when a person walked in a frame from the tree line beyond the employee lot. Not from the road, not from another building, from the trees. He reached the rear door, worked on it for less than a minute, then disappeared from camera view. He was inside for almost an hour before I heard the first banging. I asked the supervisor if the footage showed him leaving. It didn't. That was the part nobody could explain. Police said there were several possibilities. Another exit. Camera coverage gap. Human error on the timestamps. Maybe he slipped out while everyone's attention was on the inside search. All of those explanations are reasonable. I still transferred off nights a week later. Because what stuck with me wasn't just that someone got into the building. It was the way he spoke. Calm, close, hidden, like he had been standing there listening to me breathe before deciding to let me know he was there. And every now and then, when a place gets too quiet late at night, I think about that voice saying, "Hey," from the dark, and I'm right back in that cage again, staring at a half-open door that should have been locked.